Weirdly enough, these shoes right here, which were designed in 1945, were made for architects and veterinary surgeons. This shoe, of course, is this brand's flagship product, one of the most legendary French shoe designs of all time. And being legendary, it comes with a lot of legends. This extra row of stitching made boots and shoes into absolute monsters. In fact, this extra row of stitching has been found on the boots of the most daring mountaineers, explorers, climbers, whatever you want to call them, of all time. This French brand is, of course, Paraboot, and these are the Paraboot Michaels, which is also my name. They also make a claim about these shoes and a lot of their other products that I just don't believe, so today we will be testing that. Wow, okay, I'm eating humble pie right now. I am so wrong. Today's agenda. Number one is just a brief overview of Paraboot and the Michael. Paraboot is really one of the greatest shoe and boot brands in the entire world that didn't sell out. And for that very reason, I have dubbed Paraboot and all of its products as Doc Martens for big boys. Please don't take any offense to that, it's just a joke. Number two has to do with the bottom of these shoes, because I don't understand why Paraboot doesn't promote the fact that they are one of the pioneers in rubber-soled shoes and footwear, which is essentially all footwear nowadays. And then finally, of course, part number three, this row of stitching. What exactly is a Norwegian welted shoe? Okie dokie, so to truly understand Paraboot, you can't think of Paraboot as one single brand by itself. You have to think of a factory that makes Paraboot shoes and boots, but also made other shoes and boots. One of those shoes and boot brands that this factory made was called Goodyear. They don't really exist anymore. They used to exist, and they were huge. Goodyear and Paraboot were being made in the same factory at the same time, and they had a lot of similarities, but they also had distinct differences. But the important part is the people that were making Goodyear were also making Paraboot, which means you have a very specialized group of workers, of machines, of leathers, of techniques, all under one house. So if you work for Goodyear, you also work for Paraboot. And you may think, hey, I should do what I do on these Goodyear hiking boots, which are indestructible, and put them on these Paraboot shoes or boots, which are meant for different things. Paraboot for a while was meant for very extreme activities, not like hiking, but like skiing, like exploring volcanoes. But that shared knowledge means that you could take the best of what you know from Goodyear and the best of what you know from Paraboot and put them together. But also, the Paraboot factory, which was not called the Paraboot factory at the time, it was probably just called the factory started by Remy Richard, which is the most American pronunciation of this name I could possibly do. His factory at first started off building, and I quote, leather-soled shoes made to walk upon the finest of carpets. So, over the past 100 years of existing, this factory specialized in extreme luxury, extreme hiking, and extreme activities in general. But as trends came and went, certain aspects of the brand died out and started to combine all together into one, which is Paraboot, which is built for extreme activities out of luxurious materials, and now it is becoming more dressed. And then furthering the trends, pretend that these are Paraboots, they're actually Russell Moccasin backcountries, great boots. We had two sets of Paraboots. We had the extreme durability, crazy ones. We had Paraboots that were built for lumberjacks and farmers and anyone who had a really intense standing-based job. They got these big beefy Paraboots. But also, there was a subset of Paraboot work boots and shoes that were meant for less intensive jobs, like a veterinary surgeon or an architect. That's the example that Paraboot gave for some reason. After doing all that research and finding out that these were first designed for veterinary surgeons, I looked at them again and was like, oh yeah, I could totally see these being early versions of nurses' clogs. Nowadays, these shoes obviously aren't good for nurses at all. I doubt a nurse is going to want to spend 500 washies on shoes that they're going to get puked and bled on, and guts are going to spill everywhere, and they're going to, you know, that would be yucky. Okay, I have to go to improv class, so I will see you tomorrow in the second half of this video. Hopefully I'm funnier. This video is sponsored by Geesewine. These are their wool runners, and these are their wool peaks. And you can use code SNAIL20 for 20% off. Geesewine's wool is knit in-house in their production facility in their home country of Austria, aka where Arnold Schwarzenegger was born, a fellow bodybuilder like myself. As you can probably tell by my engorged biceps and my juiced, veiny calves, I've been a bit of a fitness freak lately, so I was thrilled when Geesewine reached out to me with some sneakers. Oh, and they also sent me this merino wool fleece, which I like. As we know, wool is a bit of a miracle fiber, and trying to get physically fit, I have found out that I need all the miracles that I can possibly get. It's naturally water and odor resistant, antibacterial, moisture wicking, and sustainable. It's a natural upper for running shoes, and since these are all merino knit, they're also cozy wozy against your toesy wozy. They're a family-owned company, they make a ton of other wool products, and they're just about as nice as pie. What's better than that? You can check out Geesewine's entire catalog by visiting the link in my bio and using my code SNAIL20 for 20% off. Thanks, Geesewine. I'm gonna run away now. Okay, I'm back. Yes, and... If you've ever used anything made of rubber, like tires or shoes or spatulas or rubber bands, you have this man to thank. Essentially, rubber was the miracle material before plastic became the miracle material and became what everybody uses for everything. People were like, wow, this gum elastic stuff could be used for shoes, it could be used on life jackets, it can be used for anything, we can mold it, it's amazing, except it rots and gets disgusting and is not that usable, so we have to figure out how to make it what we envision it being. So picture a boardroom in the late 1800s, there's a bunch of men in there being like, this gum elastic is the future, but there's some things about it that aren't good. We have to figure out how to fix them. And creepily, in the background of the board meeting is Charles Goodyear, and Charles Goodyear is like, I will happily figure out all of your rubber needs. And behind Charles is Remy Richard from Paraboot being like, I really hope Charles figures it out. 66 years after Charles Goodyear's death, Paraboot did not exist, but the founder of Paraboot flew to America to see what the Americans were wearing on their feet and saw rubber-based footwear and was so obsessed with it and knew it was the future that he made a new company based in rubber-soled footwear, Paraboot, which means para, which is a port in Amazonia, the Amazon, Brazil, where they got their rubber, and boot, which means boot. Where they got their rubber, boot. That is the entire company, so they do something very special that not many other brands do. Paraboot, with rubber being such a core part of their brand, still makes all of their own rubber soles for their shoes and boots in-house, which is insane. Most brands do not do that. Most brands don't even construct their own footwear in-house. They just send it out. So you may be thinking, who cares? Is this rubber special? Is it better than other rubber? Honestly, no. Paraboot could frankly just easily ship the rubber soles out to another company, stop that production in-house, and unless their factory is insanely efficient, they would save money and make more money per shoe by keeping it at the same price, but they don't. That's what's so cool about Paraboot. They do things their way, with their hands. And that, my friends, is why I said Paraboot is Doc Martens for big boys. When the Doc Marten brand was on the verge of bankruptcy, they were like, we have to make all of our stuff way cheaper so we can make more money. That worked very well. Obviously, Doc Marten is now like a global empire. When Paraboot was on the verge of bankruptcy, they were like, well, better hope the Italians like the Paraboot Michael. And the Italians were like, yeah, that's a cool shoe. Boom. And that brings us to the extra visible row of stitching on these shoes. What exactly is that about? There are about 16 trillion different ways you can make a pair of shoes and boots. Today we're going over 3 of them. We're going over 3 because I'm hoping each method builds upon the other one, so that way when we get to the method that Paraboot is using, you'll be like, oh, that makes total sense, easy peasy. So first thing we need to talk about, stitch down construction. Also, these are gonna be very brief explanations. There's tons of variations on each of these methods. Stitch down construction is the simplest thing we are talking about today. You have the uppers of your shoes, the leather part, the part that you probably look at, those go down and fold out like little gutters on your feet. Then you sew the uppers to the midsole, and then you glue the outsole onto the midsole. That's a very, very simple shoe. Oftentimes you will see stitch down construction on very heavy duty work boots, like P&W boots use variations of stitch down, not just regular stitch down, but they use that because it's very resistant to the elements because of its construction. It flares out so water naturally rolls off, and it's harder for water to come in if you're stepping on water. Then we have Goodyear welted construction, which is the most popular form of fancy dancy shoemaking. You've probably seen it a billion times if you're into fancy dancy shoemaking. Instead of the upper flaring outwards, we now have a welt, Goodyear welt. The welt is a thin strip of leather that goes under the upper. The upper folds down like this, the welt runs alongside it, and then you stitch the outside of the welt onto the midsole. You glue the outsole on. This method of construction is really great for repairability because now you have a welt and you can get a new welt, you can pry the welt off, and you put the welt under the shoe so you're not beating up essential stitches and destroying the upper like you could with stitch down construction. If you're bumping into things and you ruin the upper, you're out of the boot. But the thing is, due to Goodyear welted's construction technique, instead of flaring out like stitch down, it folds under, and then you have the welt, so a channel is created that water can go into, go under your insole, and then soak your feet. It's not as water resistant, it's not as great in the elements. And then you have the Norwegian stitching method, but you also have the Norwegian welt, which are 2 different things. A Norwegian stitch without a Norwegian welt is similar to stitch down with a twist. So this second row of stitching, the higher one that I talked about, is a stitch that goes through the upper and the insole and connects those two. A regular Norwegian stitched shoe, the upper would then flare out, and then you would stitch the upper to the midsole like you would with stitch down construction. So if the outermost layer of stitching got destroyed for whatever reason, you still have a second layer of stitching connecting the upper to the insole. And then finally, we have Norwegian welt construction, which is what Paraboot specializes in, taking everything we know and flipping it on its head. Now we have a welt like we did with Goodyear welted construction, but this is a reverse welt, where instead of a strip, it's an L shape that goes on the outside of the shoe, and we're removing that channel that water can flow into, and we're also protecting the upper to a degree. If that stitching gets messed up, you have the welt, so it may last a little bit longer. We essentially have the best of both worlds. We have a lot more durability, we have a lot more redundancy, and supposedly we're supposed to have more water resistance, but like I said, I really don't understand how we would get more water resistance from that, because there's a stitch going right through the upper. So I could be wrong. The only thing I do assume, and this is where it would be really anticlimactic, is that since the main stitching on the welt for Goodyear welting is on the bottom of the upper, like here, you have water resistance up to that line technically. The Norwegian welt is not on the bottom, it's a little up. It's like a ½ inch up, maybe less. So maybe you have a ½ inch more water resistance, which in that case is better. But now, without further ado, I think it is time for us to test the water resistance.
You'll see my shock in a second, but essentially these shoes crushed it. They just didn't get wet unless water came over the top. They crushed it.
Hold on. I was totally eating humble pie with the water resistance here, so we're going back in to check this out. I'm just gonna walk and see what happens. You know, conscious that none goes up into my shoes, which it just did, whoops. Wow, I am so wrong. Dramatically more water resistant than I ever would have given them credit for if I didn't do that. All right, well the good news is that means we can end this video on an even more positive note for Paraboots than I already was gonna give them. I love these shoes. They may be ugly or you may not like them, but they will grow on you. I'm gonna wear these every single day that I can for the foreseeable future until I get another pair of boots next week and say those are my favorite. Thank you, Paraboot, for making a great shoe. Thank you for watching this video. I will see you in the next video where we talk about samurai. And even though I lost my voice today, it's been a great day. I hope you're all doing well. Really. Okay, bye.